Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to take on the smaller of the Shimano Baitrunners. It's the classic 3500. They made it in the 3500, 4500, and 6500. This is the 3500B. In my opinion, one of the best bait runners made. I like the design on it. I like the simplicity in it. I like the reliability in the reel. So this one comes from a neighbor. Manny brought this one over to me and asked me if I could service this and get it ready for the upcoming spring fishing season, and I'm going to be happy to do that for him. So we're going to service this one today. We'll take it apart completely. We'll show you the basic service of it. I've checked. We don't need to go into the drags. The drag stack is fine in bait runner mode. It's working properly, and when you lock down in the reel, you're in good condition. So we're just going to show you how to take it apart, do the basic service on it, and get it back out there fishing for the spring run of striped bass and whatever else might be out there in the coming weeks. Alright, we're going to start by taking off the external pieces. While we do, I want to say a special thank you to our hometown heroes, the first responders. That includes our paramedics, EMTs, law enforcement, fire, anybody working in the medical industries, including those doing the vaccinations, and the hospital ER workers and the like. Thank you for keeping us safe and trying to restore us to health during the pandemic. I've removed the spool. I'm going to remove the arm for the bait runner, because when I go to remove the case, there's going to be a screw underneath this on the other side. To do that, you remove that little screw. Sometimes that screw gets salted, so go ahead and put a little bit of penetrating oil on there just to kind of loosen up the salts, make it a little bit easier for you to get out. The screwdriver seems to work right. Sometimes you need a micro screwdriver for these. And I put all the pieces I take off into a parts tray so that I know where to find them when it comes time to reinstall. This little arm should work its way out now, just like that. I like to leave this one attached. Sometimes it'll fall off, sometimes it won't. It's just pressed in there. But that'll hold the location on the other side here. I'm going to take the handle off next. That comes off by screwing it in a clockwise direction. So we'll just kind of work that way out there. And I just worked on a very large bait feeder. Those of you that have been watching the channel know that. I just worked on a Penn Live Liner 8000, which is quite a bit larger than this, and I think that's probably pressing the limits of bait feeders. Bait feeders got a lot of moving parts in them. I think when you get up into the larger fish, those moving parts and the tolerances in them and that make it pretty tough to use one of these. A lot of folks like them drifted for live lining, for example. Actually, that's what the Penn bait runner is called. It's called a live liner. I've seen it called different things, but traditionally you would snag a moss bunker or Manhattan, and you would live line it. You'd let it swim, and being in the off mode, letting your rotor let the line out would enable you to react quickly to a strike. You didn't have to worry about flipping your bail. You would simply turn the handle, lock in the shaft, and you'd be in fight mode for those fish. Alright, 4 side plate screws out, the handle off. This side plate should come off now. And I think this is one of the best engineered of the bait feeder designs. It's all kind of together as a single unit. There's 2 screws that hold the whole thing on. There's a series of springs and the like that go along with this, but for the most part, if you are just servicing the reel, you can take these 2 springs out and you'll have that whole piece come off as one unit. With the Penn Fierce one that we just did, this is actually screwed into the case. Their bait feeder mode trip mechanism. That's one screw. We'll take the second one out. I like to lay the screws on my table as I take them out, just to ensure that they're the same size. Sometimes they're not. A lot of times they're not. We just took the 4 case screws out and found out that one of those was short. The one that goes under the trip arm was a different screw. and I like to just make sure that if there is a different screw, I know where it is. Okay, those two screws are out. They're a different color, so I'm not going to confuse them in the parts tray, but I am going to put them together. And now we can lift this whole assembly off. Sometimes you need a gentle prying. This one piece here is going to ride on the this one piece here rides on the trip assembly's arm, and then you have one behind that that's going to ride on this stud. So you just keep it all together just like that. Remember when you go to install that this one is going to go over the arm assembly. This one's going to have to be moved a little bit. We'll show you when we do it later, but that gets moved. And then in the back side of this, a light oiling is fine. I'm going to use Real X, which is a fishing reel oil, just to keep that lubricated. Go ahead and put that in the parts tray as well. The rest of this is rather ordinary, if you will, in terms of repairing or servicing a reel. We're going to remove the axle shaft so we can remove the main gear. We're going to lube the bearings. We're going to grease the rest of the assembly, and we're going to get this thing ready to go. So we remove the axle shaft by taking off the tie-down clip here. That's held in place by a set screw. I'm going to take that out. That goes into the parts tray so we don't lose that. Now that gets picked up there. It's a little swing gate kind of a thing. You saw this on the other one. It's got two C-clips. I'm going to put that right with that little screw so that I don't confuse them. Then if you hold the crosswind block, you'll be able to remove the axle shaft. And then we can remove the main gear and its bearing. Behind that is a secondary bearing. We'll get to that in just a moment. I'm going to wipe off the axle shaft now. I'm going to put that in the parts tray. We're going to clean our main gear. There's old greases in there. I'm going to use a cotton swab. This is fresh, relatively fresh grease. It's just all coagulated behind the gear. So we'll take care of that. I'm going to remove that bearing. I'm going to remove the crosswind block. I'm going to remove the crosswind gear. And then we can just complete it. Now this case has very little, if any, grease in it to clean off of it. We will take care of what grease is there. Again, I'm just going to use that cotton swab to make sure that stays clean. I'll leave that bearing in place and just going to soak that with oil. I'm going to soak the one that came off the main gear in oil. I'm going to clean the back end of the crosswind block. Just put that in my tray. Put the main gear in my tray. I'm just going to let the bearing kind of soak on my side there. I'm going to clean the crosswind block. I may have said crosswind block on the other, which is the crosswind gear. Put that in my tray. And you could reinstall it, but the problem that you have if you go to reinstall is as you turn it this way, everything falls out on the table. So I just prefer to just leave it as it is for a moment. Okay, I'm going to leave that one right on the side because we're just going to come up here, we're going to service the bearing and go right back again. That should be a 12mm nut, and I happen to have a tool which is from Mitchell, but it's just an elongated socket for a 12mm nut. We're going to take that off, remove the rotor. Now we have the setup for the anti-reverse. The anti-reverse has got 6 screws, but these 2 you don't touch. These 2 are just simply holding the case on. The other 4 you want to use to remove the anti-reverse clutch. And we're doing this to get to the pinion. Notice you had a little washer that comes behind these. Don't lose those. Now again, I'm just going to leave them on the table because they're going right back in. If I was going to go and do anything serious beyond this, I would put those into my parts tray. But I'm going to assume that I'm not going to risk taking this whole thing and knocking it apart because of a lot of pieces and things moving around the desk. Alright, so all of those are there. Now you can remove the assembly, and as I expected, the pinion gear and the bearing come right out. Alright, I'm going to use a brush to clear the old grease in the pinion gear. This is a well-made reel. It's one of the reasons why I like the reel. Not only the design, but the materials that go into it. I'm going to use a fishing reel grease now. In this case, I'm using Pen Precision reel grease. And I'm going to use a fishing reel grease to re-grease the pinion gear. And you want to get a decent amount in there. And you want to get some on that shaft below there, and just a little bit where that bearing is going to ride on the inside. Speaking of that bearing, we're going to come in here, we're going to just soak that bearing too. Put my brush down, grab the bearing, and then we can reseat the bearing into the carrier. Now on this one, there's a little indentation in the bottom of the anti-reverse clutch. That's where your override is going to run. So you need to line that up as you go in to do this. Leave that off for a moment. That's the collar. And you may have to swing the arm for the position of it. And we'll take our collar and we'll put that over. Now we can take the 4 screws with those little washers on them. Oops, that's not one of the spots. You'll tell where your screws need to be seated. They'll have these bump outs on them. There's more holes than there are screws, but now we know that they go in a diamond pattern. So north, south, east, west. We'll secure these. Make sure you get those little washers on there. That's an important part of this. Got one on the table. The other 3 have been on the screw stems themselves. Let's get that last one in. And then we can turn our attention to the bottom to reassemble. So anti-reverse clutches have changed over time. This is an early one. You'll see it on the Shimanos. You'll see that on a lot of Okumas and things, these big disc kind of things. Since then, they've pretty much incorporated all of them into a smaller form. They both work the same way. You have roller bearings inside and a spring set. And a lot of these now have gone smaller, but what they fail to do when they go smaller is you can't have the anti-reverse override. This reel has that because it's engineered it into the case itself. Okay, we've cleaned that up. We can put a drop of oil there where that arm is going to reach out for the trip mechanism. We can also oil the surfaces of the rotor where it's going to run, and we'll also put some oil on the line roller. And then we can just simply lay this back on, grab our screw, or our nut. Now this came off in the traditional counterclockwise way, so it's going to go back on in a clockwise manner, righty-tighty if you will. Snug it up, and then we have our set screw here that's going to hold that nut from vibrating free. If you ever get rotor rock where your rotor is very loose, it's because that nut has loosened. Since it's swinging in a counterclockwise manner, or a clockwise manner. Oops. It's nice and smooth. I'm just admiring it. Sometimes you get lost in all of this. It's just, it's a beautiful reel. Okay, we've Now you know that your pinion gear is greased. We're going to take our crosswind block next, kind of reversing the order here, and make sure we get grease on every facet of this. The back side is going to run against that plastic in the housing. The front side is where the crosswind block is going to ride, and the teeth are going to intersect with that small gear on the back of the main gear. So everything gets greased on this. I'm going to take our main gear now. That's the gear that's going to drive the crosswind gear. So let's get grease on that. Let's get grease on the shaft behind it, which is going to ride in the bearing. We need to replace, and we need to check. Make sure all of the teeth on the gear are in good condition. These are. There's no breaks or bends or chips or the like. And then we can just simply turn that around and put that in place. And then we have the bearing that we've oiled is going to go on the top of that. Oops, I got ahead of myself there. I want to put that crosswind block in first. You can get it in after you put that main gear on, but it's a lot easier just to put it in this way. And then I always recommend taking pictures. This is an easy one to flip upside down if you're not paying attention when you go to reinstall. Remember when we took the hole down off that the screw hole was on the left hand side, but take pictures along the way. Use a cell phone camera, use a regular digital camera. Heck, do what I'm doing here with a video if you like. But take pictures so that you know the orientations on the pieces and parts that you take out. As a last resort, you can get the schematic for this reel, and that'll show you a burst diagram. I didn't do that, but you can. Schematics are generally available on the internet. Just put in your reel type in schematic and the word schematic, and it should come through. All right, I put a light coating of grease onto the axle shaft. We're coming through the crosswind block now. And then we have to sit into the rear drag collar. All right, once we get that, you want to line up those two slots so that you have a space above and below. That's where that little clip is going to ride. And my experiences with this clip is you have to be dead on with the tolerances here. If you try and force it, and I've seen reels come in with, for example, the same kind of clip is used on a Stratic. I've seen them come in all bent up, and they're saying, well, the performance isn't working. Well, the performance isn't working because they didn't sit the clip in it properly. And what's happened is that clip has broken, and then it's grinding against the crosswind block, and it's just a mess. All right, that's that part. We have a bearing that we've certainly oiled enough. It's just sitting there. And the last thing to do then is kind of the first thing that we did. It's replacing this trip mechanism. To do that, 3 of these things are fairly stationary. Now, I left this trip arm on here because that's holding this assembly in place. You can push that whole thing out if you want. You can remove that screw and take that all apart, but if it's functioning, you don't need to touch that. We know that this one goes on here. We know that the small loop in the back goes on there. There's 2 pivot points or studs in the case. One is going to grab that one and one is going to grab this. That's where I start. I start by getting the pieces lined up, and 2 out of 3. This one, the small one in the middle there, rarely if ever lines up properly. So get the 3 lined up, and then you're going to push in on this. Okay, and you just want to flip that piece over. Then you want to make sure that you're on the studs on both sides. Not on that. There we go. And then we'll grab those 2 screws to hold this down. Those were the steel screws. They're a different color. They're silver color as opposed to the black colors from the side plate screws. So patience and a sense of humor are always a good thing. I've mentioned that on more than one occasion. When you're working on a bait feeder, just make sure that you take your time and that you're not rushing. There's a lot of little pieces and parts that go into this, and you want to make sure that you get them all correct, and that you don't over tighten or miss any steps along the way. That's why the pictures are a good thing. Alright, we're tied up there. We should be able to move that. You can see how the lever, when you move it to the Baitrunner on position, how it's going to block here, and then as you swing, it's going to push that back off and let you fish normally. So again, we had a hole here that goes onto that arm pivot. We have a hole here that swings the trip mechanism. We have 2 tie down points to this reel. So this is a good time to tell you, if you enjoy seeing this kind of a video, then I would appreciate it if you subscribe. And if you do subscribe, please hit the notification button. That will keep you aware of when I post my videos, and it will help grow my channel. So I would appreciate you helping me out, helping you out. If you have any questions on any fishing reels, this one or anyone in particular, maybe you're working on a reel and you're stuck, if you leave that question in the comments, I will be happy to answer it if I know the answer to it. And more importantly, if I don't know the answer to it, I'll tell you I don't know the answer to it. But we've been pretty good on that so far. And if you have a reel that needs to be repaired, and you don't want to do it yourself, well, if you drop me a note on the email on the business card that follows, I will be happy to provide you with that repair information. So we're just putting the 3 regular screws in here. I got one more that's a thin screw. That'll come up next. And one comes down here. And then we can reattach that handle. And then we can go up top and we'll look at the drag washers, which you should inspect at a minimum and service if they need to be replaced while you're doing your annual service. Okay, here's our second part of the assembly here. This is actually in 2 pieces. This fits in there, so if you were taking it apart and that second piece fell off, don't panic. But it is a 2-piece assembly. It's a 3-piece assembly. I left the one arm on. Okay, we'll take this one off now. And again, you might need a micro screwdriver depending on the size of your Phillips head screwdriver that you're using. So go to a micro screwdriver for this one if needed. Alright, that's this. And we have our handle, which is kind of where we started this thing. That goes on in a counterclockwise manner. And then we'll just go service that drag washer up top there. Oh, smooth. Nice. Put the bait feeder on. Trip it. Get to the anti-reverse. Make sure that's working. Everything says go with that. Alright, let's take the drag button off of this. We have 4 screws here we're going to remove. This little collar keeps the water out, or some of the water out. That's the whole nature of this one, is that they're trying to keep as much water and debris out of that drag stack as possible. Front or top drag systems have a propensity for getting the drags dirty and salted. If you're in salt water, the micro sands and the salt that dries tends to settle in here, because as you're taking off the line and you're putting the line on, it's spinning and it's hitting the top of the reel. So the water gets caught in the cup and it runs down the drag washers, and that makes it quite the problem. So Shimano did a nice job here putting this ring in. Some other manufacturers have done that as well. Shimano also put the drag adjuster button. You'll notice that there's all kinds of different buttons, but that one pretty much covers the entire piece, and this little piece kind of nests inside the ring here, so they're doing their best to keep water out of here. Okay, we should have a little shield on here. I'm not sure if I see that or not. Oh, we're right into the stack here. Okay, so this is another interesting question I get all the time. This one has felt washers in it, and folks for some reason think that felt is inexpensive and cheap and ineffective. Well, that's not the case. A lot of manufacturers use felt. Shimano will use felt in their Stradics. Penn used, that's a past tense, used felt in their Penn Fierce reels. They just changed them over to the HT100s for the Fierce 3, but it's not a bad material. What you do need to do is keep these lubricated, because if they dry out they will crack. Also, for the most part, these can be replaced by carbon text or hard washers if need be. If you're tearing them up, if the fish you're fighting just are running through your drags, then go ahead and replace these with an upgrade on carbon text. But these are in good condition. There's no need to do that upgrade, and all you need to do is do exactly what I'm doing here. Grab the felt washer and just refresh them with oil. A couple of drops of oil on there. There's two sets of washers here on the hard washers. There's two that are round, and there's one that's got the ears on it. The eared washer goes in the middle. So you saw me put the first round one in, then we put the felt washers in, and then the eared washer goes in the middle, and then the last round one goes up top. So you just want to make sure that these are lubricated. You also want to make sure that they're cleaned if you find any stuff on there. And then last one in there. I was looking for a C-clip, but you don't get a C-clip because this is the collar that's holding it on. Let's get the last of the dirt off of this. We'll install that. We'll put our 4 little screws in there, and we'll give this thing a final test. So those of you that watch me know that the hardest part of my doing this is these darn little screws. So you may want to go get a cup of coffee and come on back. I just don't have a lot of luck, although it seems like I'm having a little bit better luck today. Do this in a cross pattern when you're going to put this back on, because that thing is flexible, and you want to make sure that the ridge of the screw does grab each piece. If you're coming around in a circle, you may find a high spot where you can't grab it with the screw. It's not going to be critical. Okay, I just looked over at my camera. It looks like the recording stopped. I'm not sure why, but what we've done, if something's missed in here, I won't have the opportunity to edit. We've removed the drag knob, we removed the collar underneath it, we removed all of the washers, we re-oiled the washers, reinstalled the collar, reinstalled the button, and we're in final test mode now. So we're tightening it down to make sure that the drags are holding. I like to back the drags off, particularly with felt washers if I'm not using them. We want to give it a spin. It's performing beautifully. We want to make sure that our bait feeder mode works. And you can tighten that down. Remember, the bait feeder, it's really more about the tension on the rotor here holding this than it is. You're never going to get complete lockdown on this rear. I think for some reason folks think that they should. And wow, that's a beautiful reel. Okay, one more shot. We'll make sure that the bail's tripping. And this one's on to fishing. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video. Please stay healthy, stay watching, stay fishing, and have a good day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.